Today I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, accountability, as an act of respect. I want to reframe accountability today. I have asked literally thousands of people if they like being held accountable, and almost to a person they said yes. I asked the same people if they like holding people accountable, and almost all of them said no. Isn't that hilarious? What I've discovered is that every single person almost likes to be held accountable. Why? Because people like knowing where they stand. It creates a psychological safety. If you're one of those leaders who fears doing this, please let's talk about it and reframe this concept. You're probably afraid because you think people might leave, or they won't like you, or you'll put people under more pressure. In my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. Even today I was talking to a leader and she wants desperately to create a culture of accountability. And I said to her, how are you going to do that? She said, oh well, we've set our commitments and we've set our timelines and we've set our goals. And I said, how are you going to manage the accountability? She said, oh well, there'll probably have to be a bit of flexibility on the timing and a little bit of wiggle room. That's not accountability. She was already making excuses and letting people off the hook. So I asked her, what consequences have you put in place for non-delivery? None, she said. Accountability is always held in place with consequences. If you're not putting consequences in place, there is no accountability. This is where people struggle, and the default position is, oh well, then I'll refer them to HR. But that is weak leadership. Strong leadership is setting the standard and then holding the standard. Where people are challenged is, what consequences can I put in place? The old-fashioned way was to call HR, but that's just weak. It's not strong leadership. That's not going to create respect from your team. So think about what consequences you can put in place. Consequences such as, you'll have to work through the weekend, you won't be able to take leave, I won't be able to put your name forward for promotion. I would have to put in the board pack that your report was not received on time. In a lot of organizations, it's become a negative word that makes people tense up. It sounds like surveillance. It sounds like catching people out, like distrust dressed up in management language. And often it feels like punishment. And I think that's a huge shame, because real accountability is something entirely different. Just think about the people in your life who've held you to your word, not harshly, not punitively, but consistently, who remembered what you said you'd do and cared enough to ask about it. That's not pressure, that's respect. It says, I take you seriously. I believe that what you commit to matters. I'm not going to let you quietly drift away from something you told me was important to you. The leaders who build the strongest teams are almost always the ones who hold agreements clearly and who do it with genuine care. I was working with a leader managing a really difficult team dynamic. One member was consistently disruptive, not dramatically, but persistently, and it was affecting the team, the work, and the atmosphere. The leader's instinct was to manage around it, to reroute things, to absorb the impact himself and hope it would settle. I asked what it would look like to treat this person with enough respect to be honest with them. We worked through what an accountability conversation could look like, not a performance management process in the HR sense, a real conversation. Clear about what was happening, clear about what was needed to change, and asking for something specific, a written commitment. Not to catch them out, but to make the agreement real and visible. Something that both people could return to. Follow-up reviews every 4 weeks, not to micromanage, but to keep the commitment alive. And this structure created a completely different level of delivery. Everyone in the team was happier. So here's what accountability done this way creates. It creates a team where people know what is said here matters, where commitments aren't made and quietly forgotten, where standards aren't announced once and then left to erode. And paradoxically, it creates more delivery, more productivity, more pride, and much more happiness in the workplace. Because when people know the rules are clear and consistently held, they don't have to guess. They don't have to manage around ambiguity. They know where they stand. Ambiguity is scary and it creates insecurity. The teams with the lowest accountability aren't relaxed. They're actually some of the most anxious because no one knows what the real expectations are. So the question I want to leave you with today: are your team agreements specific enough to be held to? Have you created sufficient discipline in the team? And importantly, what energy do you bring to this space as a leader? Be the leader that nobody would dream of not delivering to. That's your responsibility. Not general values, not aspirational culture statements, actual, named, specific commitments that you and your people could both point to and say, yes, that's what we agreed. If not, that's your starting point. As always, I'd love to hear your thinking in the comments. And always, lead intentionally.